In 2026, something huge is happening in India's university system. We're talking about the biggest overhaul in more than 50 years. And in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly what these massive reforms mean for millions of people. And I'm not exaggerating here. The entire rulebook that governs higher education, from how campuses are run to how you get your degree, is being torn up and rewritten from scratch. This isn't just some minor update, it's a complete system reboot. So that brings us to the big question, right? If you're a student figuring out your future, a parent footing the bill, or a professor on the front lines, these changes are going to impact you directly. So what's actually going on? Well, what we're looking at is the most significant shift in how Indian universities are run since the middle of the 20th century. We're moving away from a system that was kind of fragmented and based on suggestions to one that's unified, focused on results, and most importantly, legally enforceable. This whole transformation really stands on two massive pillars. First, there's a brand new social justice framework that every single campus will have to follow. And second, there's a complete restructuring of the national bodies that govern all the universities. Let's dig into that first one. So this first pillar is all about bringing in a powerful new set of regulations. The goal? To boost equity and put a stop to discrimination on campus. And trust me, this is a huge departure from what we had before. They're officially called the Promotion of Equity Regulations 2026. But the two words you really need to remember here are legally binding. This is no longer just about giving students access to a classroom. It's about legally guaranteeing that every single student has a safe and respectful experience, day in and day out. And this is where you really see the night and day difference. The old 2012 rules, they were just guidelines, basically friendly advice. But these new 2026 regulations, they are mandatory, and they come with some serious teeth. We're talking the power to pull universities' funding or even revoke degrees. The scope of who's protected has also gotten way bigger, now including OBCs, the EWS category, women, and persons with disabilities. And to make all this happen, every university has to build this new three-tier system. You've got an equal opportunity center to handle the paperwork and support, then an equity committee to actually investigate complaints on a tight deadline, and finally, these proactive equity squads that will be on the ground monitoring potential hotspots like hostels and labs. Now, as you can probably imagine, a change this profound didn't just sail through without a debate. In fact, these equity regulations have sparked a fierce nationwide controversy. So let's get into why. Folks who support the new rules will point to data just like this. The government itself reported a staggering 118.4% jump in discrimination complaints in just a handful of years. The argument here is that this is proof positive that the old advisory system just wasn't working, and that legally binding rules would desperately needed. And this really gets to the heart of the conflict. On one side, proponents are saying this is about basic constitutional rights, holding leadership accountable, and protecting students who need it most. But on the other side, opponents are raising some serious flags. They're worried about misuse, that terms like indirect discrimination are too vague, and they argue that the rules might unfairly leave out certain student groups from protection. This whole debate has now spilled out of the op-ed pages and campus protests and has landed in the nation's highest court. A public interest litigation has been filed in the Supreme Court to challenge the legality of these regulations. So, the final chapter on this might actually be written by the judiciary. Okay, let's shift gears to that second pillar, because while the equity rules change life inside the campus, this next reform completely reshapes the power structure above the campus. This brings us to the proposed Viksit Bharat Shiksha Adishtan, or VBSA for short. The big idea here is to get rid of a whole bunch of different regulatory bodies and merge them into one single, powerful authority. The goal is what they're calling a light but tight approach to governing. The key concept here is consolidation. You've got all these different acronyms, the UGC, the AICTE, the NCTE, and they're all going to be absorbed into this one new super regulator, the VBSA. It's about moving from a system with lots of different pieces to just one unified body. In practice, this means three massive changes. First, they're separating the money from the rules, which should reduce conflicts of interest. Second, a new graded autonomy model means that the better a university performs, the more freedom it gets. And third, a single digital system for approvals is meant to just slash through all the red tape that slowed things down for years. Okay, so we've talked about all the high-level policy stuff, but how does all this actually change the experience of, getting a degree? Let's connect the dots and see what this means for you. For students, the changes are pretty dramatic. The 4-year degree is now the new standard, but with a twist, you have multiple exit points. You can leave after 1 year with a certificate or 2 with a diploma. Plus, universities will now admit students twice a year. You can even do 2 degrees at the same time, and thanks to the academic bank of credits, your coursework can actually move with you from one college to another. It's all about flexibility. And it's not just students. For faculty, the hiring rules are getting a big refresh. The National Eligibility Test, or NET, is no longer a requirement if you're in a technical field with an ME or MTech degree. Same goes if you have a PhD. But if you're a postgraduate in fields like arts, humanities, or commerce, you'll still need to clear the NET. So with all these huge, sweeping changes happening all at once, you gotta ask, what's the end game? What is the big, long-term vision that's driving this entire, incredibly complex overhaul? While the ambition is pretty massive, the stated goal is to completely transform India into a premier world-class destination for education by the year 2047, which, not coincidentally, is when the country will celebrate 100 years of independence. Every single one of these reforms is a building block for that one big goal. And this timeline really puts it all into perspective. You can see how the pieces fit together. It kicked off in 2022 by letting Indian universities partner with foreign ones. Then, in 2025, you get the streamlined VBSR regulator. This year, 2026, is huge. The equity rules kick in, and the very first foreign university campuses open their doors. All of it is marching toward that 2047 finish line. And that leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? This entire overhaul is basically a giant bet that these two huge goals, social equity on one hand and global ambition on the other, aren't contradictory. In fact, the bet is that they're two sides of the same coin. The thinking goes that you can't possibly become a world-class education hub if your own campuses aren't safe, fair, and accessible to all of your talent. So the real test, the real challenge, is this: can India's universities successfully pull off both at the same time?